So this is going to be the last part of notes for this unit. We're going to go through and make sure that you have the labels on your plant cells and animal cells and prokaryotic cells, because you need to be able to tell me what each cell part does, but you also need to be able to recognize the cell parts from the diagram. And then we have one learning target that we're going to look at, which is highlighted here. List the 4 levels of organization in multicellular organisms, going from the simplest structures to the most complex. Now, we should have the animal cell already labeled, but let's focus on this eukaryotic. Remember, eukaryotic means it has a true nucleus. This eukaryotic plant cell. And since it has a nucleus, that should be one that we're going to label here. So that large kind of round structure there is going to be considered the nucleus. When we see basically connected tubes with no dots on them, that's our SER, or our smooth ER. Then down here we can see the tubes with dots on them, so that's going to be our rough ER. Those dots that are making it rough are the ribosomes. So here's some unattached or free ribosomes because they're not found on the rough ER. Plant cells need that added protection, so they have a cell wall. The trade-off is they're not going to be able to move and get away from, danger like animal cells can, because we lack the cell walls, but at least they have that added protection there. Right inside is going to be that plasma membrane. We can call it the cell membrane. It's the exact same thing. And then we see here, they're not interconnected. They're kind of like individual sacs there. So that's going to be the Golgi. Also, we can see there's some vesicles going to and coming from, and that would indicate that it's the shipping center, the post office. When we have something that looks like there's stacks inside of it, that's going to be the chloroplast. Because plants need to be able to produce their sugar. And then this is the vacuole. Plants also need to be able to store water for a long period of time because it might not rain, and they need that water to do photosynthesis. So they need to absorb it while they can and store it for a long period of time. Here we have, this membrane inside. It kind of looks squiggly in there. That's the mitochondria. It's about the same size as the chloroplast. We've talked about features unique to the mitochondria and chloroplast that makes us believe that they are at one time their own cells that lived outside of cells and got engulfed. This is pointing to basically the open area here, but we know that's a fluid called the cytoplasm. We can see these beams that crisscross in the cytoplasm that can be used as highways and for support. So that's the cytoskeleton. Just like your skeleton gives you shape and support, the cytoskeleton gives the cell shape and support. And then we have the vacuole again, so you don't have to label it again because we've already labeled it. Now moving down here, let's talk about some features that are lacking in plant cells. Plant cells do not have lysosomes. If they need to digest something or destroy it, they can put it in the vacuole. There's digestive enzymes in there. And they also lack centrioles, so they can divide without the help of centrioles. Whenever we're looking and trying to determine whether we have a plant cell or an animal cell, we're going to look for those chloroplasts. We're going to look for cell walls and large vacuoles. Also, it's more of a square type cell is how they're usually diagrammed. Now, one thing that's kind of a surprise is that there are some types of plant cells that produce cells that have flagella on them, but we're never going to find cilia on plant cells. Moving on here to the animal cell, that was already done in a previous section, so you should be able to, or you should already have those filled out. Again, animal cells lack large vacuoles, they lack chloroplasts, they lack cell walls. Some types of animal cells are going to have cilia and flagella, but not all of them. For example, there's only one type of animal cell that has flagella, and that's the sperm cell. And then finally on to that very simple prokaryotic cell that's lacking a nucleus. Now, it does have DNA. All cells have DNA, even bacteria cells. So that's what it's shown here with that kind of string. That's the DNA. This area where the DNA is at in the cytoplasm, it's not a nucleus because there's no true membrane around it, but it's called the nucleoid. Now, ribosomes are these small little circles, and since they have DNA that codes for proteins, they have to have the ribosomes to make them. So they have ribosomes. They're going to need that added protection as well because they're just a single cell. So that's going to be a cell wall on the outside, and then right inside is going to be the cell membrane. Remember the short structures that can help the cell move around are called cilia, and you might remember cilia is a short word. So it's the short structures, whereas flagella is a longer word, So it's going to be the structures here to help move that are longer. They look more like long tails, would be the flagella. Now the very last thing that we're going to cover is the organization of organisms. Now organisms come in two forms. They can just be one cell big, and that's the whole organism. So we say they're unicellular, uni means one, or they're multicellular, like you. You're made of trillions of cells. A multicellular organism is going to require some organization of these cells, and these cells are going to be specialized and organized into different structures. So that's what this diagram down here is going to show you, is that you are made of, the most simple structure that you're made of is cells. Cells are the smallest structure, and cells can come together to form tissues. To make an organ, like here with the stomach, you need the tissues. The tissues come together to make up an organ. So there's 4 types of tissues. You don't have to have them memorized, but you need 4 types of tissues to make an organ. So tissues come together to make up organs. And then finally, organs come together to make up organ systems.
Gavin Thomas and Jacob Wilcox to the office. Gavin Thomas and Jacob Wilcox.
It takes several organ systems to make up the organism. So again, a group of similar cells can form tissues. Tissues are going to make up organs. And there's 4 types of tissues that would be found in every organ. Organs make up organ systems, like the digestive system. And then you need organ systems to make up the organism, which is the individual. Again, we just listed them from the most simplest to the most complex. If you think about it, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, we need to take a cell sample from you, that's not a big deal. They're just going to take a little cell. It's probably not going to hurt. It's not super complex. If the doctor says, we need to take a tissue sample from you, then, they're going to be taking several cells from you. Imagine if a doctor says, imagine if the doctor says, we need to take an organ. Of course, that's more complex. And then an organ system would be even crazier, okay? So again, we're listing them from the simplest to the most complex. And this is how multicellular organisms are organized into structures that can support life.